I'm not rigid about the definition of community. I used to be, but these days I'm like, whatever definition makes sense to that organization, we can work with that. Just as long as everyone is on the same page. Every organization is so different and we learn so much from all of them. But for me, that's what brings me joy, really seeing the results of our work. I'm not an absolutist about it, but I feel more brands, especially mature, bigger brands, need to head in this direction.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Leaders Podcast, a conversation with community experts diving into their insights and leaving you with actionable ideas. Today we're joined by Richard Millington. Rich is a pioneering expert in the field of online communities. With a career spanning over a decade, he's dedicated to helping organizations build thriving, engaged digital spaces. As the founder of FeverBee, a consultancy specializing in community building, Richard has partnered with global brands such as Google, Apple, Facebook to cultivate vibrant online communities. Richard has written multiple books and can often be found on stages around the world sharing his expertise. This is going to be a great episode. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. You can also watch on YouTube, just search Steadfast Collective. But first, before we welcome Rich, a quick word from our sponsors. This is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023. And this is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023 second edition. Back in 2023, we released a beautiful printed book. And due to its popularity, we sold out of printed copies. Rather than reprinting, we listened to your feedback and we included 40% more content in this copy. We created the report to be a data-backed handbook for building the foundations of your brand's community. For instance, did you know that 70% of communities we surveyed saw growth over the last 12 months? And we know those businesses are growing too. Other metrics we dive into include community growth, biggest pain points, community purpose, what are other community managers measuring, funding, participation, C-suite involvement, and much, much, much more. In this book, we present the data and expert insights from Richard Gott, Michelle Goodall, Vincent Boone, Keen Bakatari, Rosie Sherry, Matt Sullivan, Laura Roth, Nicole Saunders, Blaise Grimes-Vaught, and Jan Carlisle. We've also included frameworks such as the community archetypes, ecosystem of impact, community participation ladder, and the community first culture nexus. There's so much in here, I can't wait for you to get your hands on this new edition. You can order your printed copy from Amazon today or download a digital copy for free at digitalcommunityleaders.com. Hey Rich, it is great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been an interesting week. I've been exploring new forms of content and different ways of connecting. So yeah, it's been good. I don't know about you, but I feel like for me, since Twitter died around a year ago, LinkedIn has become more and more important of how we communicate, share ideas, get feedback. And LinkedIn changes their algorithm so much and people get tired of different kinds of content. And so it's interesting to explore new ways of presenting ideas. And it's funny because for years and years, all I did was a short blog post every single day. You know, like the whole Seth Godin model, short blog post, 5 or 7 days a week. And then Google began punishing that. And so about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I began doing more longer form stuff and then doing more shorter form. And yeah, it's been interesting to explore what works and what doesn't work. And also, what do we mean by work? So, yeah, I'm doing fine.
Good. I'm glad you're doing well. No, that's really interesting. Like, we've been reviewing that too recently because we produce quite a chunk of content for what we are relatively.
I've seen your stuff's amazing.
Thank you. For a relatively small company. However, our clients often still don't see our content because ultimately, if LinkedIn decides we're not going to show it to them, they're not going to see it. So we've been more aggressive is the wrong term, but more bold in how we email now. We used to be like, we're only going to email our Steadfast mailing list when it comes to things like Christmas and stuff. And now I'm like, no, I'm just going to email them every week. And
you were emailing the mailing list once a year on Christmas Day.
No, not just letting them know we're going to be closed at Christmas.
That's the worst marketing plan I've ever seen. You're emailing them on the one day they're not going to pay attention.
Leading up to Christmas, letting them know we're going to be closed at Christmas. But essentially, we were just like getting so frustrated our clients weren't seeing our content and people were seeing it, but not our clients. So I said, right, we're going to email it to them. And if they don't see it by email, we're actually going to post it to them. So every quarter we take our best,
Post as in.
we create a physical newspaper. I wish I had one to hand. I do. Wait there, 10 seconds. Here. So
Oh wow, you actually print stuff out. You like chop down trees and use
no,
ink
it's all
and.
sustainable paper, Richard. Don't be silly. We created we take our best articles and we put them into this beautifully designed thing. And we are very
Yeah.
much of the mindset that people will see our content, whether it's in their on their kind of doormat or whether it's in an email or LinkedIn or YouTube. But this has worked really well actually.
I mean, if you put it in their house, they're definitely going to see it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I never thought of that. Like, I don't even have the addresses. Yeah, okay. So how
it's
many of
good.
these do you send?
We printed 100 last quarter. Next quarter, we're going to print 200. We ran out quite quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Wow,
good.
that's interesting. And it works?
People loved receiving them because it's nicely enough designed, similar to the book that we did. It's nice enough
Mm,
design that people just kind of leave it hanging around. So, for instance, there's a big update in
mm,
here on what Stripe are up to. There's a piece on here on brand loyalty. There's a case study, and people just enjoyed flicking through it. And it's not particularly long. It's like, I don't know, 16 pages. Not particularly
yeah.
expensive to print, and people just loved receiving content in a different format. It when you receive that many emails a day, to receive this through the post, it's definitely more exciting than receiving another email.
You know what? Out of all the content things I've done, nothing remotely compares to the physical book, like the first physical book that I wrote.
Yeah.
And there's something about having that tangible thing. I used to, when I was speaking at events, I'd approach them and be like, hey, can I give away a copy of my book to everyone in your
Mhm.
audience? And it doesn't really cost that much. And honestly, it's much cheaper than sponsoring the events and more effective, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But like everyone's saying, like, yeah, your book got passed to me by someone else because books get passed around a lot. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's been more effective than anything. But I also get comments like, yeah, I have your book like in my bathroom and I flip through like a new tip like each day. I'm like, if that works for you, I don't know how I feel about that, but like if that works for you, that's great.
About 5 years ago, I was at an event in Guildford, and one of the speakers gave away a copy of their book. Since
Mm,
then, I've given them thousands of pounds worth of work because we
yeah.
then started working with them, and the book become quite important to what we do, and all because they gave us, and they were doing Amazon print on demand. So for them, it probably cost, I don't know, £4 to have
Yeah,
a
that's
copy.
what I was paying, about £2 or £3, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, and we're the same. We've got two versions of our book now. The purple version and the white version, and yeah, we love having the physical stuff. So that is a great place to start, Rich. So, Rich, you run a consultancy called FeverBee. You also write books. Tell us about what you do.
Sure. So I'm a consultant. Actually, more these days, I run a consultancy, but I still do a lot of the consultancy work myself. So FeverBee has been around since 2010, I think. And when we began, it began as a blog, just me posting just daily updates, as I said before. And then more people began to read the blog, people began to reach out to me for help, and that's how everything began. And over the last couple of years, what we've been doing is formalizing our process a lot better, rather than hoping that there's some intuition that comes to me, having like a much better process in place. And we spend most of our time now helping clients build better communities or launching new communities from scratch. So fundamentally, a lot of what we do is, one is helping clients make the right decisions, like the big decisions that they have to get right, the big strategic ones. Two, telling them, if once they know what to do, telling them how to do it. What does that action plan look like? What does that roadmap look like? Three is the implementation, often helping configure and develop the community experience. And four is training, change management. And if I had to add a fifth, it would be like measurement, analyzing the return on investment. I've got someone on my staff who's got a whole PhD in this and spends a lot of time going into the numbers and really being able to tell organizations in a specific way what is the value of their community. There's a whole
Mm.
bunch of assumptions that go into that, but like, what is the value of their community? And that's what, not only what I feel that we do, but I feel what most consultants do really, which is helping clients make the right decisions, telling them, how to do, what to do, best practices, training, change management, and then measurement and performance. Yeah.
So is it fair to say you get paid to do more thinking than doing, or do you do equal amounts of doing as you do thinking?
It's weird because I think pay to think, it sounds like who's going to pay for that. So I'm going to say it's all doing, but it's different kinds of doing, right?
Mm,
So let's say an organization is trying to think of a good example. Let's say an organization is exploring the idea of launching a new community. If you think about different ways to do it, they could just do it. They could just launch it and go. And a lot of small organizations do exactly that. They test the waters and go from there.
mm,
But if you're like a big client, like if you're like a Microsoft or Mars or Intel, one of the clients that we work with, you can't afford to do that. You know that you've got your brand, your name's on the
mm,
line. So first, you want to know if it's worth doing, what's involved with it, what does that whole project and scope of work look like, who's going to be running it, how long would it take, and so you want to know that before you begin. And you can assign a staff member to try and do that if you want, but they also have a job to do. So
mm,
very often it's consultants that are brought in and be like, okay, this is what the whole roadmap looks like. This is what you should be considering doing. And then you can figure out if that makes sense to you or not. And if you do decide to go forward, then we can develop the strategy and the outline. So yeah, I think thinking, I feel like, it's not just thinking, but it's a lot of research, a lot of analysis, at least the way that we do it. I don't know how other consultants
mm.
approach it, but a lot of research, analysis, a lot of stakeholder engagement, change management, and then actually building out what this looks like in practice. I would say the research and the analysis is probably around 30 to 40% of what we do. Stakeholder engagement is probably another 30%, just making sure that everyone is on board, everyone aligns, everyone knows what they have to do, when they have to do it, how to do it extremely well. And then the actual creating the plans and the templates and those kind of things is easier. But I'm talking about one very specific kind of
Sure. A-
project here.
And what was your first intro into community from a work point of view?
Oh, it depends how you define work. Video gaming is probably what I would say. So a lot of people in the community space, and I'm sure you know this already, their background is in video games.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all kind of came of age when online gaming became a thing.
Yeah.
Like for the first time, you realize that you can meet all these people around the world and shoot at them. And even today, honestly, it's quite fun. But like, it was one of those experiences where you're like, wow, this is amazing. And a lot of us got involved in playing games online and then suddenly got more involved in the communities. So I was running gaming events, tournaments for Counter-Strike and other games that were around at that time. And I got more and more involved in the community.
Mm.
And I began managing communities unpaid, just as a hobby for a while. And then an organization called, what's her name? IG UK here in the UK, like an organization of like LAN centers where people used to go to play games because they were the only places with fast internet connections at that point. So I was running the communities for them for a while, and that was my first paid job. It wasn't paid a lot, to be honest, but I was living at home at that point. Yeah. And then after that, I did some time with the United Nations in Geneva. I did an internship with Seth Godin, which really helped launch the consultancy as well.
Nice. Good stuff. And what is it about community that keeps you coming back every day? Like there's lots of things you could be doing, Rich. Like you're clearly sharp enough that if you wanted to move out of community, you could do. I'm sure you are.
Not really. I don't have that many skills in this world. Like I can't cook, I can't like sing. So I'm kind of left with this.
But seriously, what is it about community that keeps you hanging around, keeps you writing fresh content, keeps you speaking on stage, keeps that, you're still writing books, etc. Where's the passion come from?
When I began, and even today, but not at the same degree, but when I began, I was still amazed that you could just talk to people on the other side of the planet. Like I feel like there's a generation now that didn't have that. And I don't know about you, I'm finally starting to feel old. When I used to go to these events, I was like the youngest person in every room. And now I'm like, I don't like where this is going. I feel for me, what interests me about community is just this idea, especially in the gaming space, where we built a whole culture, and it was funny and it was caring, and at times it was frankly not pleasant as well. But like, there's a culture where even today, like where I connect with people that were around like back then, and we have so many fond memories of just spending our spare time hanging out in these communities and IRC,
Mm.
which is a big thing then, chatting to each other, insulting each other, meeting up at these events that I and others were hosting at the time. And so I loved that. I think like a lot of people around 15, 16, it's kind of a moody kid, but I found this online gaming world and I was like
Mm.
almost hooked on it. Like I was really, really hooked on it. And I found my people and my place. That's what it was. I think I found my place at that
Mhm.
time and I absolutely loved that. And when I realized that brands were doing this outside of that space, I was like, that's amazing because there's more opportunities for that. I think now I'm more, not cynical, but maybe more pragmatic about what people want when they come to communities. And what excites me now isn't always the community, although I think it's great when people genuinely connect and bond and forge relationships. I think that's absolutely amazing. And there are some clients where we help them do precisely that. But a lot of our work now is like there's a puzzle, and as a consultant, you try and solve that puzzle
Mm.
and you get clues of what that solution might look like. You get an incomplete puzzle and then you try and guide them through that. So now I'm much more excited by helping clients achieve the best results that they can. And that's not always going to be a community where everyone connects and feels a sense of belonging. Far more often, especially for brands, it's communities where people ask questions and get help, share best practices. And so we think, how can we improve that? How can we make it more efficient? How can we make the quality of information better? How can we make sure everyone has a much better experience than what they're having today? And every organization is so different and we learn so much from all of them. But for me, that's what brings me joy, really seeing the results of our work. When we work with, say, Microsoft, one of my clients now, the Microsoft Answers community is huge. I mean,
Mm.
it's like an extra digit compared to almost any other community that we work with. Which means any change we make is going to impact 100 million people on the planet. I mean, it's kind of a big deal, and that's really exciting to see. Um, I think a lot of the talks. I mean, a lot of this is different parts of me. Like, public speaking was something I was always very scared of. I have a stutter, and the idea of going on stage when I was young terrified me.
Mm.
Like I never thought I'd ever be on stage, but gradually it becomes like my favorite thing I do, and I
Mm.
began like learning how to do it and doing it. I don't think I'm great, but I think I do okay on stage, and I think that's it's nice to see my own progress and journey and feel proud about that as well. And it's just fun. Like I
Yeah.
love being on stage now. Like I've got past a point where I'm nervous about it, and I just genuinely like look forward to and enjoy it. Um, but it's also helped with work. So yeah, and I think the content side, yeah, it's just nice. I think as a consultant, you have to publish or find a way to make clients aware of who you are, what makes you unique, what you can offer them. And so the content side is part of that. But I think even if I wasn't a consultant, I'd still be publishing something somewhere.
When I was in infant school, which is kind of our first school here at in the UK, I had a speech therapist throughout. So yeah, I had a really bad.
Nice.
I don't think I had a stutter, but I just wasn't interested in speaking, and just struggled to get my
Mm.
words out. And even now, I now know that I have fairly bad dyslexia. So public reading for me is not ideal. So when I'm doing a talk on stage, I need to know that off memory. I can't deal with reading notes publicly
Yeah.
or reading a book publicly. I need to know it off by heart.
You know what's funny about that? Have you ever seen the King's Speech?
Yeah.
You know the part where when he sings, there's
Hmm.
no stuttering at all?
Hmm.
I've realized that for most people, like when they give a talk, I think like they have a broad idea of what they're going to say. I memorize almost every single word because I know when I memorize it, almost
Yeah.
word for word, I know exactly when I'm going to finish. I don't go like over time. But like the stuttering is way less, I don't have that at all. And it's so interesting. Like,
I'm the same.
but it also means you've got to practice way, way more. Like
Yeah.
when it's like a 45-minute talk and you memorize like every single word, like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a challenge.
I'm the same. I practiced. I learn all my cadences. I learn where to leave breaks.
Mm,
I practice it all. So really similar. But jumping back into community, when it comes to when you're working with these brands, obviously you'll be working with different teams depending on what the community is going to do. From a marketing point of view, so putting your kind of marketing hat on or working with folk who have marketing hats on, how does that integration often happen? because it's something which I'm hearing lots of CMOs just kind of shouting the word community and hoping kind of magic returns will happen. But realistically, there's much more to that. It's a much longer play. It's not a quick campaign that's going to get you your yearly targets kind of resolved. So how do you go about integrating properly community and marketing teams?
Yeah, I feel like the first thing for us is to get a working definition of what community means to everyone. Because
Mm.
I think some people, but not many, but definitely some, it's like a senior exec comes up with the idea we should have a community of people that are going to share positive stories about us and talk to each other, share our work, and that sounds great. And then they're like, and this person is going to take care of that.
Mm.
But that person is like, what? Why would people want to talk about us? Our employees don't even share our own stuff. Why would the customers? And so they often have a misunderstanding of what community is, what it involves. And so for me, the very first step is always to define what it means. And I'm not rigid about the definition of community. I used to be, but these days I'm like, whatever definition makes sense to that organization, we can work with that. Just as long as everyone is on the same page. Because if they're not, you're never going to be talking about the same thing. You're never going to achieve the right results. So the definition can vary. Sometimes it's a community on a hosted platform and it's managed by a community team. That's a very traditional definition that a lot of people use. And sometimes it's more fluid. Sometimes some people treat all of their customers as a community, and it's about engaging them and improving the sentiment. And there's a whole continuum of definitions you can use here, but you need to have somewhere that has some boundaries, some limits, and so people know what it is and isn't. And then based upon that, you can make changes. I mean, based on that, you can make a plan of action that are going to change and improve the situation. So the definition is first. Once you have the definition, we usually begin with the understanding of what the organization needs and what they expect to get. I think community, people talk about it, but they don't often talk about the unique value of a community. Like, what can a community do that your customer support team can't do? What can it do that your sales team can't do? How does it convert more leads? What makes it unique? And a lot of people struggle with that. So we make sure that that's in place and it's very clear what behaviors are associated with that. So it might be if we're building a community for, say, for like growth, which is more and more of the work that we do, especially over the last couple of years, then how exactly does a community drive growth? And we think very specifically, if it's generating leads, then okay, we can work with that. How does a community generate leads? And then we have to go deeper. Is it a qualified lead? What does a qualified lead look like? And then what specific behaviors do members have to undertake to become a qualified lead? And then how do we make that align with also what members want? Because once we get that organization side, we look at what members want, and we make sure that we're very clear from the end perspective of like the goals of the organization, what behaviors specifically people have to do. And so it might be you want them to download some information and then that counts as a lead. It might be you have an existing working definition of what a sales qualified lead looks like, and then you can adapt that to a community. Or it might be you want a community to improve conversion by generating case studies and testimonials and referrals and all those things that can work. Or you might have a whole lead scoring system that can be complex and designed specifically for a community. But for me, it's always about working backwards. I think for most people as well. I don't think we're super unique in this, but I think being very specific in what the outcome looks like. I mean, not just it's going to generate leads, because there's a million things you can do to get people to submit an email address. That's usually not good enough. But maybe it's people that are attending a certain webinar or conversation or learning why your information or your products and services are better. That is usually something more specific than that. I think also for marketing today that the relationship between advocacy and community is getting very, very close. And we're finding more and more that our work is advocacy based. And that comes in two different forms. One that I spoke about at the London event a couple of weeks or months ago, which is turning people in a community into advocates for that brand. So making sure that they're not just sharing content within a community, but sharing advice, best practices, advice outside of that. And that usually means how do we help them grow their audience, grow their reputation? How do we promote people to be stars of the ecosystem, not just within a community? Because one of the challenges that a lot of organizations face with marketing goals is that they're often just promoting the people that are their customers already, because those are the
Mm.
people that join a community. And the challenge is, how do you go outside of that? How do you reach people you don't already reach? And that means you have to help people grow audiences or partner with people that have those those audiences as well. And the other part is employee advocacy. I think so often when we do the research, and there's another piece that we're launching really soon, we find that people want to hear from people that work inside the brand, get direct insights that are almost unfiltered, but they don't usually have a good place to do that. And I think employee advocacy fills that hole. And so we're working with a couple of organizations now on how we do that, how we set up employee advocates, not just to create content, but to embed them within their community ecosystem. So they have the connections of people that want to help them and share their material. They have groups that they participate in, like really helping people engage in the existing ecosystems that are out there today. And so I don't know if that answered the question specifically, but that's how we think about it. There's a whole range of things you can do, but I think linking up those behaviors
Yeah.
to the goals is absolutely key. And I think organizations often make a mistake of just trying to turn the switch and hoping that a support community can be a marketing one. And that doesn't tend to happen as well.
Yeah, agreeing the success metrics is really important before we even, pitch for a project. We need to know what success looks like for them. Ultimately, if we don't know what success looks like for them, then how can we measure that? And one of the tricky things we can often find is we'll be told what the success metrics look like for this project, and then we then ask, okay, so what's the current KPI for that? And they're like, oh, we're not currently measuring it. I'm like, well, how can we measure if it's a success? We're going from no number to a number. We have no idea if this number is going to be good or bad. So I think that can be tough, but agreeing what success looks like is so important because it gives you, like what you mentioned, that kind of common language. And when you're making decisions, you go, does X help us reach this success metric? Yes or no? Yes, great. We're going to go for it. No, it's going to go on the back burner, maybe a future idea, et cetera, et cetera.
I think also that's where I think consultants help, because we will never know an organization as well as what they do. But what we do know is that wide angle lens of what's worked to so many different kinds of organizations. And if we know that, we know different best practices, what's worked elsewhere. And so it's quite common where an organization might have a community or be in the process of creating one, and they ask us for help. And that's awesome. And we'll ask like what the goals are, what they're hoping to achieve, and they don't know, which is kind of weird in a way. You're doing something, you're not sure what the goals are, but I get the sense that people want a community. But then that's where consultancy comes into play. We're like, okay, we can help you set those goals. You know, we can talk to stakeholders and go and help you down that journey. And other times they might know what the goals are. We're like, okay, this is how different organizations like yours measure those goals. These are some best practices that we know. And I think the great thing about doing this for 14 years now, which is insane, is that we've got so much information on how people measure goals, what works, and all the nuances and intricacies of that. I think very often when I see the return on investment advice shared by people in the space, I'm like, I feel it's idealistic. You know, if you have access to all the data you want, all the support that you want, then yeah, you might be able to calculate the ROI in that way. But very often it's not even close. Like it doesn't survive first contact with reality. And there's a lot more complex and nuance to it. And I think that's where consultants can really help.
When you go into a organization, so you've had your early conversations, you've agreed to kind of work together, what percentage of those organizations already have a community that you're going to help versus something new?
It's probably, I don't keep exact track, but I imagine 60% existing, 40% new. I mean, here's an interesting thing for anyone thinking about becoming a consultant. When you become a consultant, you think you're going to work with organizations that aren't doing well. You know, you target a lot of your marketing at the beginning, which if I'm simplifying it, is that you're doing it bad, we can help you do it a lot better. And what most consultants realize over a long period of time is that you're going to get most of your work from organizations that are doing it well and want to do it better, you know, at the world-class level. And that's because they're already investing in it. They want it to succeed. Organizations that aren't doing well usually don't invest additional resources to fix it. There's some exceptions to that, but generally, like, a lot of our work is more helping very large organizations, often in tech, get better results in their community, manage their community, training their team, migrating their community, just making their community as good as it can possibly be. That's probably a sweet spot these days.
And of that 40% of where it's new, have they already earmarked a platform they want to use, or is often part of your work helping them pick the correct platform? And the reason I ask is because the technology is obviously, I see technology and platforms as an accelerator for growth, not an answer for growth, right? No platform is going to come in and solve all of your problems. However, once you've got plans and processes and what procedures in place, it can facilitate. And I'm interested to know how many times somebody's already signed a contract with X and you then come in and you're trying to fit, Y into Z. You're trying to fit into a square peg into a round hole type thing. Or normally, are you involved in that process of trying to select the correct platform to suit their needs?
I would say selecting the platform, about a third of that 40%.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere around that level. Sorry, they've already selected the platform a third of the time.
Okay.
That would be my guess. They've signed it. For us, honestly, we try to engage clients before they select the platform.
Yeah.
And part of that is just because very often if they select the platform, then they tend to follow the platform vendor's advice. And some of that is good, but it's always going to be use as much of our platform as you possibly can. Like
Yeah.
there's very rarely, being in those meetings with those vendors, they're all well-intentioned and a lot of them are great, but they're not going to recommend the kind of things that we'd recommend because we're coming at it from different angles and perspectives.
Yeah.
And so it definitely helps to get there first because then I feel we're the trusted source of advice. And vendors have a lot of expertise on setting up their platform and integrating systems and a lot of stuff like that. But I feel we offer more unique expertise in how to get the community going in a way that makes sense for the long term, that isn't just do everything that the vendor wants. Yeah.
Rich, so when it comes to community for the next 5 years, like, is there something that you can see? You mentioned the advocacy and kind of community getting closer and closer. Is there anything else you can kind of feel bubbling up that you're like, oh, there's something here? If you could not use the answer AI, that would be fab. If you can think of anything else other than AI, that would be super. But is there something that you're like, oh, community is on the cusp of this, or this is going to happen? Or I know I'm asking you to look into a magic ball here.
Sure. I'll say this, but I think a lot of people disagree with it, and we should listen to those people that disagree as well. I think a lot of the advice that gets shared about building a community today could have been written 10 years ago, and a lot of it is still like select the platform, drive. I mean, I can tell you what the old playbook looks like, and it hasn't really changed. It's decide the goal, select the platform, see some activity, drive people to the platform, incentivize experts to engage, and then grow via search. That is the playbook that most major brands have been running for 10 to 15 years now. I think the problem with that is that preferences are beginning to change. If we take AI out of it for now, because we're not quite sure how that's going to play out, and that's definitely going to be a factor, I think the way that people want to engage with communities is changing. A lot of the old techniques and strategies don't really work anywhere near as well as what they used to. And I think we talk about it in this community everywhere approach, where if I want to get answers to questions, I might go to a search engine or I might go to Reddit. There's more competition there. The ability to create a community isn't scarce anymore, so anyone can do it. So I think the old playbook isn't going to work as well in the future for many types of communities. And the new playbook is going to be something more like, one, define what your relevant ecosystem is. Because if you think about the old way was generally pretending nothing existed. There weren't any subreddits to compete against. There weren't any influencers in this space. You just do whatever the heck you want to do. And now there's more competition. That's going to be a challenge. So I think the new playbook is going to be define what your relevant ecosystem is. Are you just targeting people that want answers to questions? And then you can see what exists there for that already. Are you targeting people that want to learn or people that want to sense belonging? But first, define what the ecosystem is. Discover what already exists. And here you'll find opinion leaders, you'll find existing communities, events, groups, other organizations in that space. Engage with them to identify what they need. how can we grow and support them?
Mm.
What can you help them with? Who can you connect them to? How can you support them? Then figure out how you can support them. How can you help leaders grow their own audiences? How do you help the existing events become more successful? Because it doesn't matter if it takes place on your platform or not. This
Hmm.
idea that we need to have control, I think it's self-harming in a way. I get it, but I think it's self-harming. And so really figure out how you can leverage the unique assets that a brand has: your audience, your source of truth for information, your resources, things like that, to really help people grow, satisfy unmet needs, correcting any fake information, and then helping expand and grow an ecosystem around you. I think hosted platforms will always have their place. Definitely, I think for Q&A support, high search traffic results, they are great. But the moment you go beyond that model and you want more than just a Q&A experience, there's very few successful examples that live solely as an isolated community today. And I think we need to understand that the typical person, when they engage in a community today, they don't go to a hosted brand experience that has everything in one place. They tend to go to different channels for different reasons. So if I want to learn, I might go to Coursera or Udemy, look up courses there. If I want to get tips on using more of a product, I'll find some top influencers in that space. If I want to connect with peers, I'm not going to go to some hosted forum. I'm going to go to LinkedIn. And that's what most people do today. And I feel we don't adapt to it. I feel that's a big
Yeah.
misalignment. And we need to adapt
Yeah.
because this is changing quite fast. And I think we need to change too.
I've had this. I've been thinking about a particular brand recently, a lot about this, and as you mentioned,
Can
that I
you
was like,
name the brand?
oh yeah, I will.
Okay.
So it's Apple. I was recently, and obviously they're a bit of an odd one in themselves because they've got high walls and whatnot. But when I'm looking to solve a problem, or when I'm trying to find a new iPad case or whatever it is, the way I do it is I search the key phrase and I don't let Google show me the result. I then type in the words
Mm.
Reddit.
Reddit.
Always. So even just things like best places to go in Copenhagen, space, Reddit. For some reason, I have an innate trust with strangers on very niche ecosystem, on very niche things, because I think that if you are engaging in a subreddit about Copenhagen, you probably care about Copenhagen. So Apple has 5.4 million members on the unofficial Apple community on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm aware, and you may be able to correct me here, I don't know. I don't think Apple have any engagement in this. I'm sure there is someone at Apple who is very much aware of this and very much is on top of it. But as far as I'm aware, there's no ask me anything with the team at Apple going on here. They very much have their own support forums and so on and so on. And it does feel like I really love it when a brand gets involved in their own subreddit. And you're right, it is a little bit risky because it's outside of our world and we can't control it. And ultimately, Reddit might change their rules, or they might have different ad policies to what we agree with. But that's where people are, and that's where people are engaging. And ultimately, is having a toe in that pond a little bit better than just ignoring it entirely and pretending it's not there?
So I think Apple's kind of a unique case in that they're very close. We've worked
Yeah.
with them in the past, and it's a very closed organization. But I think more interesting examples would be Microsoft, like one of our clients, or Sony especially. Like
Mm-hmm.
Sony are really interesting. So I did, as we were talking about before this call, I filmed a bunch of new training courses about a year ago, and I asked a film crew, for your equipment, where do you go for questions and support? And I was expecting them to name the official Sony online community, which they're spending a ton of money on. And the film crew said every product had its own Facebook group, and that's where everyone goes.
Wow. Okay.
And I began going into Facebook and looking at all these groups. I was like, he's right. These groups are highly active. None of them are run by Sony. I could rarely find any involvement by anyone at Sony whatsoever. But they must be deflecting like millions of dollars of support tickets at least every single year. Every product has its own one.
Mm.
And so a brand would look at this and think, well, this is dumb. Let's put this in one place in a community so people can
Mm,
get answers to different questions at different times. And that makes sense. It'd be easier for them, right? But people just prefer a Facebook group. They just prefer it. They prefer sometimes the brand not to be running it. They prefer to be able to criticize. And I think that's just a situation that is going to become more and more common. And the people running these groups are often consultants or vendors that do have a vested interest in selling services. And so there's a whole unique dynamic and complex that's playing out, not just with Sony, but more and more organizations today. And Microsoft is kind of the same. Like for every, yeah, there's a Microsoft Reddit, but that's not the one that matters. What matters is the Microsoft Teams Reddit, the Microsoft
Xbox.
Azure Reddit, the Microsoft Windows Reddit, and so I think what brands have to be prepared for is that there's going to be more and more of this.
Mm,
And a lot of their existing communities are 100% reliant on search traffic today to survive.
mm,
And what happens if that dries up? Or what happens is what's happening now is that Google is sending a lot more traffic to Reddit.
mm-hmm.
And what happens then? And you can say, oh no, we need to fight this, or you can support it. You can go with the current and say, hey, let's reach out to the person that's running these groups, these
Yeah.
subreddits, to see how we can support them. What information do they need from us? How do they want us to be involved? And also, if they're doing it, we can save a ton of money by not doing it ourselves. And there's nuances and costs and different calculations involved with that. But I think more and more we've got to stop pretending that nothing else exists in the ecosystem that we're in, because especially for larger brands, it definitely does. And more and more, those are becoming more popular than official communities today.
Yeah.
And because that's how people want to engage. And so it makes sense for today for brands to spend a lot more time engaging with the existing ecosystem, the key opinion leaders that are out there, the influencers, as much as we hate that term, the existing user groups, and helping grow and support them, because it benefits you. And it's going back to almost the traditional roots of building a community, where you wouldn't just launch a new community from scratch. You'd see what's out there and how you can support and make connections and grow it with all the assets that you have.
Nice. I like that. And then there's still no reason why you can't have your big flagship event once or twice a year where you kind of gather everybody and everything. And I think there's so much in that. And it reminds me of almost going back to being a teenager when, your local bands would have like street teams and they were just given a big pack of stickers and told, just go tell people there's a gig happening at the weekends, that sort of stuff. And it's kind of going back to that, where it's actually a case of, it's great what you're doing. Please call it unofficial, but also, what do you need from us? Like, we're here to help. We're here to help. And I think for me, when I'm trying to find out something technical, the niche of the group, the more I believe it, the more trust I have in it. Like, if it's a Sony A7 II, people in there probably own an A7 II. They're probably not interested in a Sony whatever, something else random, because why would they even be in that group?
I'm going to see if they have a Facebook group. Was it the Sony A7 II?
A7 II. There'll definitely be a group, A7 II. They call it the A7II.
There is a group. Wow, okay. A7 II. What else is it called? The Sony A7II.
Yeah. That's the way they.
Oh, there's one for each version of the product as well. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, it's so niche and specific. And there's like, look at the first groups that come up here is the first one's got 50,000 members. The second's got 177,000 members. And there's even one for like beginners, for experts, for people in the UK. Like, all of them have 31,000 members. What do they have here? 26,000 members. And so I feel like if you work for Sony today, you should be driving people to these groups, because it's okay. You might want to have some influence with the person that's running it to make sure that they're not going to go nuts. But like, you should be driving people to these groups, because that's where they get support. And it's natural, and it's in the flow of what they do already. You're supporting the existing ecosystem rather than fighting a losing battle against it. That's 100% why I think we need to be going. Not exclusive. I'm not saying that there never needs to be a hosted community. There's many situations where that still makes sense. If there's nothing out there at the moment, if the subreddits aren't highly active, if you're the only game in town, there are unmet needs in the ecosystem, then do it. But check there are unmet needs in the ecosystem, and not just creating a community because you want some sort of control or you need to measure the level of engagement. I mean, I think there's a better way of doing this.
Also, what's the point of competing against essentially yourself?
Yeah.
right? I imagine there's been many a boardroom table where the conversation comes up going, this subreddit's got 4 million users. That's not, we need to beat that. I was like, well, why? Why wouldn't you somehow work together or partner or at least get involved rather than seeing it as competition?
So what I would say to that, I don't think, in my experience, yours might be there, I don't think that's a discussion. I think people will look at a subreddit that might have 4 million members and be like, on a subreddit? But
Mm,
like the design is awful. It doesn't look that good. We can create a unique experience that is
sure.
better for them with documentation and resources and events. And we can create all this stuff in one place. And all these people are going to come to us because we're a much better experience. And they'll do that and then realize people just like Reddit because it's easy to use. And the infosec requirements are easy. And you don't need two-factor authentication to log in. And you don't get logged out of the platform all the time. And if you know how to use one subreddit, you know how to use them all. And like you've got an account that's tied to, and they learn that lesson the hard way. And that's a challenge. And I think people I think execs need to understand or do more research or hire consultants like us to really explain to them, like, this is what your audience actually thinks and what they actually want. You think you're offering a better experience. Your audience thinks you're offering a more complicated experience.
Hmm.
And they already go to Reddit. They're not going to remember to go to your platform every single day.
Mhm.
And I think that's a challenge. And as I said, there's a lot of nuance to this. I'm not an absolutist about it, but I feel more brands, especially mature, bigger brands, need to head in this direction.
It has been a delight chatting, Richard.
You too.
If people don't already follow you, you run an email newsletter, you run all sorts of things. Where's the best place to find all things Richard Millington?
FeverBee.com or my LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn might be best if you can include it in the notes. Otherwise, FeverBee.com is great. And thank you so much for letting me be on this. I'm a huge fan of you and the work you do. And it's great to have a chance to meet this past year once or twice. So yeah, keep up the great work yourself.
No, cheers. I really do appreciate that. Cool. Thank you for all the support and thank you for everyone for listening and watching. And we'll see you next week for another Digital Community Leaders podcast. Cheers. We are Steadfast Collective. We exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. A team of smart creatives, we are excited by technology and we always aim to leave the internet in a better place than we found it. Working with many of the UK's leading communities, we use technology as an accelerator to help them grow and engage their members. Our applications resource membership organisations, grow businesses, and create value. We know what it takes to ship, market, and scale applications, and we apply this wealth of background knowledge to everything we do. We're not just another agency, we are community builders.